Now we'd like to first introduce the panelists. From the right-hand side, looking from the audience, we have Wendy-san. And then we have Professor Hiroya Takeuchi from Chiba University. Professor is Vice President and Director of the University Library at China University and Chair of the Digital Library. And also from Kyushu University, we have Professor Tomiura, Head of the Research Data Management Support Division, Institute for Data-Driven Innovation Promotion, Kyushu University. And on the far left, we have the Nishida-san from Kyushu University, Research and Industry, Academia, Collaboration, Promotion sessions. So with that, Professor Nishida, please begin the discussion. Okay, I think that we have about 90 minutes for the panel discussion, so let's begin. Before that, on the previous presentations, we received a couple of questions, so we first would like to ask Wendy-san to answer these questions. So let me read out the questions. A question on DCN. Do DCN staff members communicate to researchers the fact that data might be curated? And is there such a step incorporated in the workflow? Do the staff members tell researchers that they might be curating their data?
That's a good question, and it is one that we've talked a lot about within the network. And it is up to the member institution whether or not they share who is doing the curating. Every institution tells the researcher that they are curating, but some of them don't mention that it might not be from their home institution. Some of them, that relationship between the curator and the faculty member is very important. And it is up to the curator to say if they want to communicate that someone else curated the data. For example, at Cornell, we tell our faculty members that not only will we be curating your data, but I will be asking an expert colleague at X institution, Washington University in St. Louis, who will be helping me curate that data. I talked about the fact that community was so important. I also think credit for the work we do is really important. And so I always wanted to acknowledge when my peers do work for me.
Thank you. There is another question, but since this is regarding CDS, maybe we can bundle questions regarding CDS together at later stage. So regarding DCN, I just wondered if any audience member want to ask any questions to Wendy at this juncture. We would like to solicit questions regarding DCN at this point, including those of you who are here in this room as well as participating online. Any questions regarding DCN? Members of the panel, do you have any questions regarding DCN? Are you okay? Okay. Now then, we would like to move on to panel discussion. The purpose of the panel, I would like to give you some background. Wendy gave us talk 1 that is regarding Cornell University's data service, which is Cornell Data Service, joined by various organizations to form a community providing wide range of services. That's what Wendy told us in the talk 1, which means in Japan, whether a library is the only entity who should do that, or maybe we should incorporate other entities to do that, and so on and so forth. We do have discussions as to who should do those services here in Japan as well. So Wendy's information is great reference to us. And for talk 2 regarding DCN, this is beyond boundary of universities to form expert network to provide services. So, having heard what you said, rather than perhaps providing services, perhaps this is a place to train the curators for the future and also learning from each other. So probably that aspect of the DCN can also be important. So this is a kind of new form of community which were quite new to us. So on those basis, during the course of this panel today, we would like to discuss about when we at Japan want to do our research data management support, what sort of organization or platform should we design for that purpose is a topic for today's discussion at the panel. Now, on top of Wendy, we have 3 members of the panel, as I said before, and I would like to introduce each panelist just a little more. Professor Takeuchi, who is the head of University Library and Vice President of Chiba University, and also MEXT 2030 Digital Library Promotion Council member, which is organized by Ministry of Education. He has been involved in library administration and also discussion regarding future library services, and also 2030 digital library. There was a discussion and on the network building among various university libraries and libraries. And also research data regarding services are being contemplated for 2030 digital library discussion at the council. So that was the reason why I invited him to be the part of this panel discussion today. Now, Professor Tomiura is my boss, and he's the director of the Research Data Service Division, and also at the Data-Driven Innovation Initiative. This is the organization we have at Kyushu University to provide a whole life cycle of data, research data management. We have set aside one organization who wants to do that at Kyushu University, but it seems we are unique in that other universities don't have any identified body to provide those research data management services. Of course, there are various challenges where you don't have any dedicated organization in place within the university. So what sort of research data management support would be desirable is a discussion that we would like to hear from Mr. Tomiura. Now, Professor Nishida is the Director of Research Planning Division at Research and Industrial Collaboration Promotion Department at Kyushu University. So he is in charge of research promotion at our university. Together with 11 national universities in Kyushu and Okinawa region, we have a common platform for collaboration, which is a Kyushu Okinawa Open University, or KOOU. This was formed in March 2023, And there's a research data management and utilization work group within this Kyushu Okinawa Open University initiative, but also they have research assistants support human resource working group as well. And they are doing various exchange sessions. So URA as well. And URA is considered to be a very important player for research data and research management support. So not from library's viewpoint, I just want to ask Mr. or Professor Nishida to give us a hint or insight regarding what sort of research data management support can be possible as a part of research assistance. So those are the lengthy introduction of the members. So regarding the panel members, maybe we can invite 3 members. If you have any questions to Wendy's talk, maybe starting from Professor Takeuchi, please. Thank you, Wendy, for your very informative talks. I really appreciate and thank you for that. Now, regarding talk 1, what sort of data service is being designed within Cornell University? That was a major topic. But on page 7 of your talk 1 slide, this is organization, structure, and sponsorship, and leadership, and others are included in this organizational structure. But thinking about the players who will be fitting into organization, I think this is really understandable. And perhaps for Japanese universities who want to do open science promotion or data management promotion, probably research promotion divisions or university libraries and computer centers or data infrastructures, they all need to be involved. I think that is a structure that we have for Japanese universities as well. However, to create one integrated organization, you really need a power to do that. That is my impression. For example, Ministry of Education, regarding research data management, when they issued some document, that will be reaching to the university. And then once the paper is received, the university administration give us to university library, because libraries are the place where management of the data should be taken care of. However, when it comes to leadership, this structure is important, but the leadership prior to the establishing of the structure is quite important. So that is something I would like to ask Wendy as to what was the leadership exercise prior to these organizations become complicated or completed. I think your comment is really the key question that we would like to ask of Wendy. Can we ask this question to Wendy at this point, so that maybe Nishida-san can take over to talk about the research promotion. So, but anyway, Wendy, if you could answer that question, please.
That is a very good question. And I think at Cornell, there was part of why we were successful in getting this set up is that we had both university administration identifying good research data management as a need, but we also had a faculty member who, they are no longer in this structure, but they were part of that. Do you remember I mentioned there was a 2-year grant that started it? There was a faculty member in the astronomy department who was part of that grant. And I think that the engagement of our researchers in saying this is important was key to getting that grant off the ground and key to the realization of the university administration that it was important. Interestingly, he is no longer part of the group, he's retired, and we have a faculty advisory board here, but I think that the leadership, the top-down leadership from the university came because of the faculty interest. And once the faculty yell loud enough that they need something, the university administration tends to listen. So the other thing is, although we are volunteers from these different organizations, when we started, I don't know if this will be too subtle in English. Some of the people were voluntold, we call it. They were said, you must volunteer to be a part of this. So when it first started, they said, these organizations will be a part of this. This is important to the university, and you have to participate. And so that leadership it's hard to say no to university administration. So the people in those service providers in the bottom box there, even if they felt that they didn't have time or they didn't necessarily think it was important, once the university leadership said that this was important, they had to participate. And then we started building community, and then people wanted to be a part of it. So although we are organic and ground up in many ways, when we first started, there was a mandate from the university to do it. That's a little different than leadership, though, isn't it? And the leadership, I think, primarily comes from the management. Well, the actual leadership comes from bringing those people together and coordinating it and asking permission from the management council. But I think we would have been a stronger organization if we had probably someone other than me leading it. But I think that mandate to do it from the university was very, very important. Does that address your question?
Yes.
Okay.
May I react to that? Yes, Professor Takeuchi. Thank you. I thought that was very interesting because library had been actively involved in research data management, and I thought that it didn't come from university administration, but rather libraries. I thought libraries were taking leadership in all these activities. That was my assumption, but not at Cornell. And I thought that was very interesting. And even more so, the university administration was convinced by researchers' voices. And I thought that was very interesting. I'm saying this because, in fact, right now at university, when we try to talk about research data management, in reality, many of the faculty members think that it has nothing to do with them. That's the reaction from faculty members, because there are certain fields where research data is very important, and for them it is a norm to handle research data. Therefore, outside of the university, there are already environments established to be able to handle data, and those faculty members or researchers feel that there's no need for the university to give support for data management. Well, we are in 2025, and this is when we are starting. But in Cornell, you started in 2008. The gap of more than a decade must reflect the difference in how we are trying to start these activities. Well, thank you very much for your response. Would you?
One point of clarification. I do think that libraries were leading research data services, even in 2008.
I see.
However, the university asked us to come together and work on them, to break down those silos. So I don't think that it wasn't that the libraries weren't leading, but very specifically, the university wanted us to start collaborating. So slightly different.
I see.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Well, thank you very much. And earlier, we heard the word volunteer. And there's a question online concerning how you act as volunteers. So let me read this question first to you. You said that CDS is consisted of volunteers, but I'd like to know more about institutional positioning or organizational positioning. Are you mandated by the organization, or do you propose which is accepted and the group installed? Because the meaning of volunteer that you said seems to be somewhat different from what we imagine from the word volunteer. Because when we hear the word volunteer, you engage without getting paid. But here it's a volunteer work, and that was a part that was difficult for us to understand. Could you elaborate?
Yes, I'm sorry if that was confusing. When I use the word volunteer in this context, I guess I mean that people do contribute to the CDS in addition to everything else they do without receiving any additional salary. So it is a part of their job, but it's like an add-on. And as far as who participates, so I think it probably could have been confusing. When the CDS started, particular groups were identified to be a part of it. The library, IT, while the social sciences group initially. But then I, as coordinator, continued to identify other units on campus that did research data management support, and I asked them to come be a part of it. So in that sense, I also asked for volunteers to come. I identified the fact that the Biotechnology Resource Center was doing support and that we should know what they're doing. And so I asked them to volunteer. Similarly, our IT security group specifically, we are seeing questions about security. I think it would be important for you to come be a part of this group. So you asked about organizational positioning. It was for somewhat informal, somewhat organic. There was some leadership instructions at the beginning of who should be a part of it, but as services grew at the university, the membership of CDS grew to accommodate that.
私の方からちょっと追加で質問させていただきます。
I have an additional follow-up question. So in that sense, this network, the structure of this network, in order to build an organizational structure of this network, the institutional budget, you did not require any institutional budget to build this structure. Is that the right understanding?
There was funding in that initial 2-year grant, and they did a lot of surveys, et cetera, during that 2 years. But after the 2 years, the only funding I have is, I think I have a budget of $2,000 a year to print business cards and have snacks at some of our tables. Any any money that I spend, I have to ask the management council for money from. And for example, Central IT paid for the developers to build the data storage finder tool. I didn't have a budget myself to do that. I had to put together a proposal and ask them for the money to build that.
So for the first 2 years, where did you get the funding again? So the first 2-year grant?
It was an internal grant funded by our Office of Research. We don't have many internal grants anymore, but in 2008, there were internal grants.
わかりました。ありがとうございました。
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, Professor Takeuchi also asked earlier, who should take leadership? So, Nishida-san, I would like to ask you about that. Who should be the leader? Who should take the leadership? I think that's one of the big challenges in Japan as well. So, if you have any view on that, or if you have any question on that, please go ahead. Yes, thank you. Well, leadership, who should exert leadership is a very tricky question, I think. But before talking about that, in the conversation with Professor Takeuchi, there was something that I wanted to ask you about. So there was a requirement or request from the faculty members. That was the trigger, that was a starting point you mentioned. But as you made progress on research data management, what would be the benefit for researchers and faculty members? By doing this, what would be the win? What would be the benefit for researchers? I think that we should be able to tell them that. And listening to you, I guess that in your case, the researchers were the ones who wanted this. So I think it was a very refreshing perspective, and I was wondering what was the context where they came up with this request. So if we can ask you more about that, then I guess we can also understand who should be the leaders, who should take leadership. When researchers voice these needs, then we can probably better understand who should grip the research data management practice. So that's what I'd like to ask. Okay, Wendy-san, can you respond?
So I think initially when CDS started, it was about breaking those silos. It was about admitting that no one group on campus could do it all. That in order to provide holistic services throughout the life cycle, no one single group could provide everything. And in order to know whether or not the university as a whole was covering the whole life cycle, we had to talk to one another. And until the CDS was formed, there was no structure that would bring those groups together. So initially, I think that's what it was about. It was about trying to get rid of people working in isolation. So I said that I think the library was doing a lot of good things even in 2008, but so was the Center for Social Sciences. But those two groups were remember in 2008, we weren't doing anything virtually, right? So we never had meetings. The library didn't meet with CCSS. So the creation of Cornell Data Services gave a reason for these people to come together and talk. And I think that even if all it ever ended up being was a place for us to talk, it could have still been a success. But I think those conversations opened up gaps that we were able to identify and figure out who could best fill them. So sometimes it was CDS who could fill it, like the creation of that finder tool, right? We needed a central place to bring all that information together. But sometimes we identified a need. For example, Globus. I mentioned this tool that allows movement of large segments of data across different platforms. That wasn't a solution that CDS provides. It was identified as a need because we talked, but the solution was provided by the Center for Advanced Computing and also the Biotechnology Resource Center. So I don't know that that helps me with the question about leadership, but it does explain, I think, why we initially came together and why those conversations were so important. Because it's really easy for us to think, I'm doing a great job in my library at providing, sharing, or providing education. But another example is related to education, that because we now talk to one another, the library knows that we don't have to provide education about statistical software because we know that's provided elsewhere on campus. But we do know that for a while, no one at Cornell was providing education about data visualization. But we knew that because we came together and talked about it. So I do think the question about leadership is important, but I think it's also part of why we are successful is because no one told us one single thing we had to do. What they told us was talk and figure out what our needs are. Write a proposal, bring it upward if you need money to enact it. And otherwise, we want you to organically discover what the needs are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
はい。はい、ありがとうございました。ちょっと私もこれに
Thank you very much for that. So on a related note, I have an additional question. May I? I'm a moderator, so I probably shouldn't ask you questions, but you said that you talk to different people. So with which department should you collaborate? Well, who should be the appropriate partners? You have to identify the appropriate persons to work with, but it's difficult. And when you may go to the person and consult the person, but then all of these departments that you approach may not say yes to collaboration. Some departments or functions may turn down the offer to collaborate. So on that, in reality, how should we build the network based on your experience? If you have experience that you can share with us on that, I appreciate that. You explained that if this is a volunteer-based organization, then that would be easier for people to decline. So that's why I'm asking you this question.
Yes, it is a bit challenging, and I think that's where the human interaction part comes in. There's a wide variety of people in different positions. So I mentioned that right now the gentleman who is the director of our Center for Advanced Computing, he comes to the monthly consultants meeting. He's higher in the university than I am, but has an interest in the data. And then we have my two people from my team that have only worked in the library for 1 year. They also come to the consultants meeting. So there's a wide variety of experience and job types that participate. And that in itself is interesting, right? So that breaks down these barriers of it's not who we are, it's what we do. And if you provide a data service, then your voice is important in this conversation. As far as knowing who to invite, some of it has been, some of it is very formal. When I, for example, wanted the Biotechnology Resource Center to be a part of the group, I first approached the director of the whole unit, and they made a suggestion of who ought to be in it. And they suggested a gentleman whose name is James to be a part of it. And then I went and met with James, and before he agreed to participate, I talked to him a lot about what it meant. I talked to him about what the commitment would be. I talked to him about what the expectations of consulting would be. So I made very clear what it meant to be a part of CDS. And then he had the option to participate or not. There was another example where I did this with a different IT unit, and the initial person that I talked to was like, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this, but I'm gonna refer you to another person. So it was probably more informal, but again, I had a long period of time to do this, and we didn't start with 25 consultants. We started with 10 consultants and slowly grew as we became established.
はい、ありがとうございます。では、
Thank you.
富浦先生も、
富浦先生、
の
you are also in charge of creating internal organization for research data management, so you might have some questions or maybe observation or opinion. Tomiura Sensei, if you could use your microphone, please. Yes. In the case of Kyushu University, I am actually at the Research Data Service Division, which is very similar to CDS in Cornell context. Probably I was at the vice director of the library, and perhaps the starting point was the head of the library said that we are going to have a share in data. And if we are to ask others' data to be used by our organization, we need to have a policy in place. So that was a kind of order for us to create a policy draft for data management, and that was a starting point. So it's not the leadership from the top, but the library took action based upon the direction of the director of the library. But we soon discovered that the library alone cannot do everything. So we asked for budget to get funding from the organization to be able to create this department that I belong to. And there was by that time, there was a president leadership. So bottom-up approach and top-down support, we really need to have both. Otherwise, organization cannot be established. So I guess a similar situation in Cornell University. So my question is as follows. During the lunch meeting, I think I said this, but the researchers, they think they are appropriately managing their research data. However, reality is maybe you can find final version or final version or whatever dubious of data comes identified. So researchers believe that they are appropriately managing their research data, but they may be managing. But is that appropriate or not? There is a question. But the researcher don't pay attention to that or don't recognize. Is there any education? I mean, education is important to make them aware of that. And also, the faculty member need to identify the pain point of the researchers. I think our approach has to be from both directions. And you have advisory board in your organization. I'm not sure whether this is working, but the faculty members, researchers, what they are feeling needed is being advised using this organization in your talk. That is something we are missing for our organization. Because we are researchers by ourselves, so we just use our gut feeling. And we do not know the opinions of the researcher at large. And some people say, well, don't bother us, or that's none of your business. Those are the opinions sometimes I heard. Because researchers are tasked with so much work to do, and then research data management, that's additional burden. So they don't want to take up on such a burden. So researchers or researcher community, I think we need to have a group of members who can give advice to researcher community at large. But in the case of Cornell, you have advisory board. But what is the structure of this advisory board, and how large community that this advisory board is doing kind of opinion hearing, and how are you doing at advisory board? And that is my question.
I was hoping no one would ask about our advisory board. And that is because I don't think we use it as much as we could. So I could look on the webpage, but I would say I think there are 10 faculty members on the advisory board. I send them annual reports. I send them information about what efforts what needs we're finding, and I ask for their feedback. And often I hear nothing back from my faculty, but the formal faculty advisory board. But again, this bringing of all the different consultants together allows us to get information. It's not just one librarian hearing from their faculty or going with their gut. It's all 30 of us consultants, and each consultant has 5 or 10 or 20 interactions with faculty members, and they bring those back to that meeting. So I'm actually in the process, I'm working with my management council right now to see if we can engage our faculty advisory board better. I don't know if it's more regular meetings, bringing those people together into a room, whether it's bringing them together with the management council. I don't know exactly what it is that we're going to do, but we are going to refresh the membership of that faculty advisory board and make a point of using it better than we currently are. But I do think we still hear from faculty because each of us as consultants work with many faculty members. And so we start to be able to get enough voices together to see patterns that way. I think one danger of working with the faculty advisory board is that the faculty advisory board, let's say I have 10 people on my faculty advisory board. Those might be 10 very opinionated people, but they don't necessarily reflect the opinion of all researchers at Cornell. So in some ways, I need to balance what I hope I hear eventually from my faculty advisory board and the many voices that I hear from the consultants and their interactions with my faculty. One other thing is we have done 3 surveys over the last 14 years to faculty to ask in a written format what their needs and pain points are.
Thank you very much. I have one last question to you, which is a simple question. 2008, you started the research, and in 2010, the organization was established. In our case, in 2022, we started, and it's still not well recognized. Faculty members don't know what service we provide. Only a few people probably know what we are doing. Now, towards the end, you talked about a newsletter being sent out as an outreach activities, and you also said there is a desk for receiving consultation in your talk. Now, how effective? Well, when did you start to feel, or how many years did it take for you to feel that your activities is actually showing effect?
I think we had the benefit of that DMP requirement coming at exactly the same time. So if that hadn't been a requirement, I don't know, I think we would have gotten off the ground much more slowly. But I think there was this urgency and this confusion around that policy requirement. And so things spun up very quickly. As soon as, so the unit was formed, or the CDS, or it was RDMSG at the time, but CDS was formed in 2010. I arrived in 2011, and that DMP requirement hit in 2011. And so honestly, the first year was pretty slow, but as soon as people had to write those DMPs in their proposals, we were getting questions. Now, obviously, not everyone still doesn't, many people don't know that we exist. So that outreach effort is really, really important to continue working with different organizations. And one of the groups that has been very successful for us has been, I know this wasn't exactly your question, but I wanted to add it. I mentioned this at our university, we have every department has someone that they call the research administrator, and it is a staff position that supports our faculty in things like writing grants, finding spaces and labs and instruments, kind of helping with the logistics of being a scientist. And we have worked, CDS has worked very closely with those research administrators because they have the trust of their faculty members, and they can say, I don't know the answer to that, but I remember going to this talk and I heard that there's this group called CDS on campus and they can help you. So finding, even if you can't reach the faculty directly, finding other places you can kind of get your foot in the door, at least for us, has been helpful.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Well, we just talked about leadership or building the structure. So let me summarize what we've discussed so far. We've been discussing, and I was thinking that in the United States, organizations like CDS when it is being built, the research support staff, not researchers themselves, but research support staff, may exist in a good large number. So for research data management support, this such research support staff may be very helpful. On the other hand, in Japan, we have within universities we really do not have people who support researchers. So in Japan, it would be very difficult to create exactly the same system or structure like you have in the United States, but there is a need for research data management support. Then, what should we do? What should be the most adequate structure? Of course, this is a big question, big questions, so I know we don't have any answer right now, but do you have any comments? It's not specifically to Wendy, but I would like to pose this question to all the panel members. Maybe each one of you can give us a word as to what you think. I know I'm asking a very difficult question, but anything that comes to your mind, if you would like to share. I'm not asking you to speak in any particular order, Professor Takeuchi. Well, I think she is asking the question to Professor Tomiura, but let me answer first. Well, it seems that the concept of volunteer, I was wondering what are the facts behind this concept of being volunteers. No, it's volunteers because the activities are not described in job descriptions, but doing that work would have positive impact on your basic work to be a volunteer in this work, which means the staff members who are not researchers in Japan, the so-called administrative staff who support research activities. Of course, in URL there are some exceptions, but in most cases, those are the people who are not researchers but supporters. And that means they have to work within an organizational structure and they cannot make independent decisions. Earlier, Wendy explained to us a mechanism of inviting volunteers, but that would not work in Japan. Now the question is, how do we initiate changes in Japan? Wendy told us a Kono model, or maybe an American model. If we need to follow that, we'll have to rethink our organization. In Japan, we have an administrative organizational structure, and we may be able to secure staff members within that organization. And then we have to think what we can do to find human resources out of those administrative organizations. Now, who would like to answer next? Did you understand my question? Well, I'm asking that now that you've heard the coronal examples from Wendy, and if we want to offer similar service in Japan, what would be an organizational structure that should be introduced in Japan? That was my question. And your answer, maybe it's difficult. Well, Professor Takeuchi and we are saying don't ask those questions. But first of all, what the service offered by Colonel, it cannot be done, and such research data management cannot be done by faculty members because it's too burdensome. Also, as Professor Takeuchi said, in certain areas, the data sharing is already a common practice for certain research areas, and there's already an established framework, and unless you share the data, you cannot progress with the research. In that case, we cannot develop a new system. because there's already a precedence, and we want to align our activities with the already established and well-developed management system. It will be impossible. When there is an open access available already and well-managed area, they can go ahead and do it themselves.
So we should do that, but then we have not reached that point, and that's where we should support them. And that much is not too big a burden. And in our case, we already have a well-established structure, so I think that we can start taking that step. So the appropriate research data management means that what's important is that we have to avoid troubles in the future. So to repeat myself, we have to divide them, break them down into 3 boxes. So where we are already managing well, and where we have to start supporting, and where we don't have to support. These are the 3 areas that we have to identify to understand where we allocate our support resources. In terms of building the organization, we need the bottom-up approach as well as the top-down mandate. Otherwise, we cannot build an organization. That's all. Yes, I'm sorry for asking you that question, but thank you for responding. Nishita-san, anything to add? Yes, thank you. I think it's difficult. As Professor Takeuchi said, the volunteer organization may be difficult to establish. So I think that we have to do this within the institution. Sorry, the interpreters are not getting the audio feed. Interpreters are not getting the audio feed. So I forgot what I said. Yes, I remembered. So yes, so we have to do this within the institution. And from another perspective, how can we utilize research data from that point of view? In that sense, I think in the context of research assistance, I believe we can handle this within the institution or organizational structure that we have today. So that kind of organization needs to be built. And as Professor Toyoda said, what we need to do is different depending on the discipline. So, and the professors and researchers may not be aware of that. That's what I was thinking. So on that, I guess we have to communicate with faculty members to understand what we need to do. So that's a bottom-up approach that we have to take. Yes, thank you. So Wendy-san, please.
One other thought that had occurred to me, I know that things happen very organically, mostly bottom up, a little bit top down at Cornell. I know that other institutions that have started these campus-wide support groups have done so because their institution has passed some new policy. So not federal policy or national policy, but for example, the faculty passed an open access resolution, or they passed a new research data management policy. I know, for example, Duke University just updated their faculty requirements. And because the university changed that policy, it was an opportunity to create a group like CDS. So watching out for different opportunities that might come that act as that driving point would be very useful. And as far as awareness, one other avenue that I realized that would be perhaps more universal here as well as at home, if you don't have that research support staff, is actually graduate students. Because they are very interested and receptive to new ideas. And I don't mean to knock faculty members, but sometimes they are resistant to change. But graduate students are at a point in their careers where they want to do better, they want to do new things, and they often, in my experience, have convinced their PIs and the faculty that they work with that research data management is important. So marketing in particular to graduate students would be another possibility to raise awareness with the faculty.
ありがとうございました。この問題
Thank you very much for that. So, as I said at the outset, we cannot come to a conclusion and the answer to these questions today at the end of today's seminar. And what I think is important is that these advanced cases like this in the United States is something that we can learn from. And instead of just copying that practice, we should build an appropriate structure that we can build within each of our institutions. And we need to emulate their practices. And one of the options may be to give up doing anything about this, but then we should probably adopt what we can adopt from these pioneering practices. I think that's something that we can do in the future. So sorry I summarized the discussion so far, but on CDS that Wendy-san presented, we have received some questions. So we now would like to ask Wendy-san to answer these questions. And it seems like we have only limited time, but we want to also talk about DCN as well. So first, here are the questions on CDS. Online, we have an anonymous participant who's asking a question. So first, we need to share information and identify needs. That's important. I may be pessimistic, but even if you identify needs, the group who is supposed to be in charge of the additional task may not be willing to take that task. Did you experience such case at Cornell University? If so, how did you overcome that issue or challenge?
I'm trying to remember if there was a case when that happened, which is a little surprising, right? It sounds like it doesn't, the scenario you describe sounds very realistic. Like someone just like, I don't have the capacity, or I don't have the interest, or it doesn't align with my skills. But I can't think of a single time where there was not someone who was willing to step up and fill in the need. So maybe we have been very fortunate. But I can't think of a scenario where someone wasn't willing to say, I will at least try.
はい。ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Okay, another question on CDS. from Suzuki-san at Kyushu University. On CDS, you said that you had volunteers, virtual volunteers, but how did you solicit them? How did they come together?
It's been a combination of me recruiting people and people saying, I've heard you do this. Can I be involved? So there have people who have come and said, I think I would like to know more about what's going on our campus. And so far, I have been very inclusive. If someone wants to be a part of CDS and they are willing to meet our code of conduct, if they are willing to take consultations, I've let them participate because I feel like that sense of inclusiveness is very, very important. And you see that by the fact that there are 13 librarians in CDS because they are very interested and they want to learn more. So a combination of going out and recruiting, like the Biotechnology Resource Center, and people coming and saying they want to be a part of it.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you. I think we have 10 minutes remaining. I'm sorry, my time management is so poor. But let's move on to DCN. Regarding DCN, I think there was a question from Suzuki-san. So let me just read this question out. I heard that participating universities are on the rise to DCN. Number of curators and librarians participating, are they also increasing? If increase is happening, perhaps original mission cannot be passed on to the next generation easily, but do you have any mechanism in place to make sure quality and those missions are passed on to?
To the first part of the question about growth and how we are managing it, if you are a member institution, if you are paying to be a member of the DCN, part of your obligation is to provide one member to the governance board, optionally a member to the advisory board, and a total of 5% of a full-time employee curating. A minimum. So at our university, Cornell started with just 2 curators. So we each committed up to 2.5% of our time to the DCN. We now have 4 DCN curators, so each of us only have to give 1% of our time. In reality, we give a lot more, but that is our commitment. So even though our number of curators is growing, there is still a base commitment by every institution of a total amount of time that they will give to the DCN towards curation. As far as mechanisms to allow the passing of information, that's something that we have worked really hard to maintain, and we have struggled a little bit with it. Most of our documentation for processes live in a shared Google Drive, but I will admit that when we built this, Lisa Johnston was the lead PI on that Sloan Foundation grant that we got. And when she started, we put all of our content in a drive that she owned. We didn't even follow our own good data management practices. We should have put it in a group drive. So when she left the DCN, we had to kind of reorganize the structure within our storage to pass that information on. So we're learning, we're getting better at it. That ticketing system that I mentioned, JIRA, that tracks our interactions and our curation activities, that's been really important because we also gather information about what was done to each data set, which university submitted it, which university curated it, how much time was spent on it, what level of fairness did it come out with at the end? All of that was tracked in that system, and that is owned by the DCN, so we will maintain information in that system. So we have a few mechanisms in place to ensure that even though personnel changes, the information stays with the network.
はい、ありがとうございます。で、この
Thank you. Now, DCN, I guess we don't really have much of the professional, skilled persons in Japan. So, network of data curation is very difficult to be created here in Japan because of the scarcity of the experts. But regarding specific tasks, maybe we can hope for creating something like a curator networks. But making a network or making community beyond institution, Takeuchi Sensei, may I ask this question? If this is not too much burden to you to respond to, but what do you think? Well, Wendy talked about DCN, and she touched upon this in her presentation, so perhaps that's what she said. But when it comes to network, we tend to collaborate with equal or similar organization of similar size with similar resource, and that is a starting point. Probably that is what DCN is doing at this point. But as was mentioned by Ishita-san, back in 2023, in January, Ministry of Education came up with the report regarding the Open Access University Deliberating Committee. The results was talking about the connecting universities of different types and different sizes. When they want to do something new, you can't make sure same amount of resource coming from different universities of different focus and different size. But in order for universities of different size to be able to embark on something new, we have to have some mechanism in place. And that was what we found in the reports. And Kyushu Okinawa Data Consortium probably was one of the response to such a call. So the issue is university with scarce resource yet wants to do some research data management, which is something quite new. How can they get started? If that happens, perhaps larger resource university can help smaller university to get them started. Probably that sort of collaboration would be quite important. So slide 30 of the DCN, you have a future opportunity and challenge. And this is probably something relating to what you say. So if a DCN has some specific activities to incorporate or different size of universities of different resources, I would like to hear from you.
So there's been a couple of different ways we have tried to do this, and it is an ongoing process. I'm open to any suggestions that you have. But we have tried two things. One, we have allowed institutions to join knowing that they can only join for 1 year. So they join for what we consider a pilot entrance, and that doesn't have any cost associated with it. They get the benefits of learning to curate. They get the benefits of the shared curation time. They don't get any voting rights in the governance board, but they get the option after 1 year to join as a full paying member. And we have had one institution do this with us, and then they did at the end of the year. They were able to justify to their library administration the cost of a full membership and were able to join. And they were a slightly smaller institution that did that. The second a thing that we have tried is that we received, I talked about that Reality of Academic Data Sharing grant, the RADS grant that we got with the National Science Foundation. We got a second follow-up grant on that same project, and as part of that project, we received grant funding to support 3 smaller institutions to come in and train curators as part of the network. And so we did receive some outside funding to support these smaller institutions as well. One thing that we're running into a problem with, and I'm all ears for suggestions, is how we actually give the smaller institutions the sense that they are welcome to be a part of the network. How do we make sure that we are not leaving the impression that you have to come in already 100% skilled up and ready to be curators? And I think in some senses we've been successful. Some of our new members don't necessarily have an institutional repository in place. They don't actively curate their own data sets now, but in becoming a member, they say, we're willing to learn how. But I think the smaller institutions that tend to be under-resourced financially, which might be intimidating to join a network like the DCN, also are understaffed in a human resources sense. And so even saying that they're going to have a 5% commitment of somebody's time might be intimidating. So I wonder if other mechanisms that they could contribute to the DCN other than staff time is something we should consider.
Thank you very much. What we just heard is more for the library side. Now, Nishida-san, as a research supporter of research, promoter of research, for network, community, the presence, the requirements, any experiences, any opinions from you on this topic? Well, you talked about KOU after the lecture. Now, in Kyushu area, the national universities are trying many things while sharing the resources and research data, URA, what to do with the research personnel. The discussion is still going on, and we haven't really reached the level to do something together. But when it comes to knowing what other universities are doing, it seems visible, but in reality, we don't really know. I think after finding out what is happening all across universities, we will be able to discuss what we can do together, what we need to do together. And we have reached this level with KOU, and I think it was a good thing that we have done that. At least we have reached that level through KOU. We have certain activities. Now, there will be financial difficulties in the future, and sharing what we can do, doing what we can do. I think we will need to find ways to move ahead, otherwise universities will not be able to sustain. Now, in terms of research support, you are a development system, maybe shared, or research data management. In that context, in a similar way, we may be able to standardize the human resource development for that purpose. But for QOU, the national universities in research in Kyushu area, all universities have different issues, different situations, and standardization may not be possible, or standardization may not be most adequate. But including this, I think we trying to achieve better communication may be very important in this respect. Thank you very much. Right now, it may have been a message to Professor Takeuchi for the library. Any comment from you? No? Thank you very much. Well, we are running out of time. So at the end, if you have one word to share, this is your opportunity. And if Wendy has any last message to all the discussions you have heard so far, perhaps you can encourage us with a final word. So anyone to start your last comment?
I guess the one thing that in preparing to come talk about this and thinking about what has worked and what has not worked and why, I think one message might be that to get started, you don't have to have it perfect. You have to have a goal, and you have to have a set of priorities to guide you. But we didn't end up being exactly what we thought we were going to be at the beginning, either CDS or DCN. But we've been willing to be agile in how we respond and how we adjust to different demands and the practicalities of how people meet and how people work. And so while it's easy sometimes to think I need to get every little thing worked out before I can engage in anything, sometimes it's also good to just jump in and try different things. I think this is something in our library we are trying really hard to say, that it's okay if it's not perfect at first. And one other thought that I had jotted down here, so that was very philosophical, right? Don't be afraid to jump in the water. My other kind of suggestion and seed that I wanted to plant is whether or not, so the networks that I've talked about today were people networks. They were about skills and expertise. But there is also an efficiency in sharing infrastructure. And that is even harder to do, but I think may have equally as large rewards. So as we think about developing institutional repository platforms or data sharing platforms, can we, as leaders, find ways to make those more efficient by scaling them across various different units, across colleges, across campuses, across institutions, and take what we learned from these people networks and apply them to infrastructure networks? I'll let you guys do that. I will work with the people.
はい、ありがとうございました。本当に我々
Well,
が
thank you very much. You really Thank you very much. That was a really encouraging message. Thank you. That was an encouraging message. Not just this panel, but over the week I discussed frequently with Wendy. We don't have to be perfect, but start the first step. I believe that was a very important way of thinking. As I said earlier, This is a very big topic, and you cannot find solutions easily. But different people, different institutions moving towards the same goal will be very important. So we heard the lectures and we had discussions, and we hope what you learned today could be a help, but it may be small, but I hope it can be a help for us to move ahead together. Well, the time was limited, but I'd like to thank Wendy, Professor Takeuchi, Dr. Tomiru, and Mr. Nishita for your participation in a panel and sharing with us your comments. And this concludes the panel discussion. Thank you.